Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt, and you have reached Venus Unplugged. And what we work on here, what we look at, explore, examine, is the way of Venus. This is a place where the wounded heart finds inspiration and knowledge to accept the task of becoming a wise heart. So what we've been looking at in the last several weeks is the major arcana in the tarot. And the purpose of this is to understand that these major arcanas can be used as talismans or teachings or meditation, that each one of these arcanas are part of human development and are part of the wholeness. So one always leads to the other or is an opposite. So you can really spend the rest of your life just studying this stuff. And one of the great scholars is Paul Forster Case, C-A-S-E. So look, I think his book is Keys to the Tarot. And they are even a set of uncolored tarot cards, and you can color them in for those who like to color. And today, we are looking at the tarot card of the devil. Now remember, little hint, devil is lived spelled backwards. So we know the devil is around when we are going against nature or against ourselves, against our principles. The devil is very much related to the shadow, all right? And the shadow is the part of us that we don't know about ourselves. So the collective unconscious, we've got the collective unconscious, which is the basic subterranean forces in the world or in man's humanity, all right? And that has a real beastly side that we don't want to look at. And of course we see it when war. A lot of devils come out in the war. The devil rules it, as a matter of fact. And we see so much of humanity that's not even human. So why would you want this card? Why would you want to look at it? Because you need to understand. You need to be able to reflect. You need to be able to see when somebody, and most of all yourself, is really kind of being, channeling or acting out their devilish side, the side that they don't know about. It can be a primitive response. And, now with this Venus retrograde for the next 6 weeks, there's going to be a lot of primitive responses. And there's nothing nastier than a love of scorn to bring out the devil. So we need to stay really conscious. You can say, okay, this is what I would like to do. I can act this out in my imagination. I can do a pantomime of this. But to act it out in reality is not going to fare well at all. So this card, when we need to understand, because it's the hardest thing. People just want to be good. Dangerous. Just wanting to be good and not being able to, sometimes it's impossible to comprehend. Because when people are guilt-ridden or neurotic, they're more than willing to think they're the worst person in the world. And meanwhile, they're just a lightweight. They just want to just identify with that. But the devil, and in its meaning, is what we want to look at. How do things go topsy-turvy? In one of Jung's book, Answer to Job, which I think is one of his most brilliant works, he comes to the conclusion, which is a little hard to swallow, but there's a lot of truth in it, that, God has a shadow. And sometimes I wonder if that's what part of our transformation on this planet is that we're taking a little bit of the certainly in human side of God that we don't understand, and we're working it out here on behalf of our divinity. So, it's not black and white. There's always this paradox. Now, in alchemy, there's a law, and, that a pair of opposites can cure each other. And see, reality comes in pairs. It's up, it's down, it's black, it's white, it's God, it's devil, male, female, good, evil. But as one becomes more aware, those opposites or those paradoxes come closer to one another. And then we start to realize, wow, okay, we've all got a little bit of this. What's going on? So if there's a person in your life who's kind of acting out or doing devilish, tricky things, okay. Now, the devil is a completely different the archetype. The trickster is the archetype in us that works on behalf of our higher self. Its purpose is to trick us into waking up. The devil, believe me, does not care about your higher self. It doesn't care about anything. It's a primal force. And in so many ways, it's not even personal. It's just if we get out of balance. Remember, last week was temperance, like staying in balance. If we lose our cookie, the devil's going to get in. Going to convince us that was a really good idea. And it's not always a good idea. So the closer you get to your own truth, the more you perceive contradiction. And the key to understanding is to see things from a new perspective and being able to accept the presence of paradox in your life. And in due time, you will realize your own truth. And then you can celebrate life and laugh and play and dance upon the earth and enjoy the material. But you can't become a slave to the material. And bondage results from too much concentration on the material success. Stay attuned to the matters of the heart and the spirit. And, of course, party and have a great time on the earth, too. Yesterday I had this insight. Well, I'm still working on it. You can get insights, and sometimes it takes years to really be able to concretize, to really be able to, what was that, okay? And realization that when we're getting ready to leave the planet, when we're preparing for the sacrament and the sacredness of our death, everything that belongs to matter stays with matter. So the diseases that very often people feel obligated to get before they die, that dissolves everything and brings it back to the earth, and then the spirit goes on. So there's this separation. So the mystery of the God and devil are revealed by reflection. As humanity changes, so does the conceptions of God and the devil. Faith and science must work together, holding a sublime and holy balance to produce a new reality for humankind. So when you are reflecting upon this God, kind of jot down what your first response. When the people will either go into absolute denial, like, there's no way that the devil exists. They go complete denial, or get so paranoid. So shift from paranoid to paradox, and then you'll be in the right area code. So when you are willing to be able to reflect or know that we all have a shadow, and then we kind of go shadow hunting. what am I really up to here? You need to ask yourself straight out, is this really for my highest good? Or do I just want to act out this primitive side of me because I really think revenge is going to work? Or I really think if I torture that other person somehow, I'll feel better. No, you won't. And so there's that old saying, the devil made me do it. And there was a lot of truth in that. The shadow aspect. Now, it's not the absolute archetype of the devil, no. People like to play at that, and some people are into that worship. That's their religion. It terrifies some people because, it's like, oh my God, they have all this power, and it's so fascinating to me. It's like, why do you believe that Satanism has all this, that the people who do that have all this power, and yet those who are trying to be in right relationship with shadow and light don't have equally as much power? In the fear, we give it over. The devil wears Armani, man. You never know what it's going to show up at or the form. It can be very charming, but there's always a coldness, a deadness. Or we ask ourselves, am I living my life backwards? Or is this relationship with myself or the world or coworker, is it bringing out the worst in me? Am I going backwards? And you're not going to change that. But you can recognize, oh my gosh, I get caught up in this dynamic. So be careful, of the simplistic judgment of good and bad. It's always a mixed picture. Now, what happens with this devilish inclination that every human has, the devil is the archetype of anger. So, yes, of course, get anger, but give it a time. Say, okay, I'm just going to give myself 20 minutes of writhing around here and losing my cookie and really carrying on and really giving it its fullness. And then in that 20 minutes, you could put a timer on it, and that's it. Now, if you can't stop that anger, you're in an archetypal possession. And you'll be doing some weird things that, of course, you're going to have to justify. But there's no justification for it because it's what motivated you. Who was behind the act? Who was behind the kind of righteous rage that people have? So, or when we meet someone or a situation that we're judging in a negative way, it's more than likely it's a mirror image of your own weakness. That doesn't mean you're living out that weakness. It means you fear that you may have that. It's like, liars are so offensive. Really? Well, every time we say we're fine when we're not, guess what? We're lying. Every time the negative animus or anima comes up and tells you you're ugly and a flat slob and you're stupid, you're lying to yourself. So we need to be able to look at that and be able to go like, wow, never realized that. I count too. So part of this tarot is to be able to see how the devil whispers words of temptation to sidetrack you from your path of virtue or the purpose of your life. And one of the big, I don't have the time. Well, if you give up dancing with the devil and acting shit out, you'll have time. If you cut something out that really isn't for your greatest good, you'll have time. Time is not the enemy. It's our use of time. And as I said, there's all sorts of noble and useful things we can be doing with our lives. And if you aspire to goodness and gentleness and righteousness, but some people, they aspire to be aggressive and rugged. Individualism. It's like, no, I'm angry and I'm going to act it out on you. So you need to know what you're looking at. And you can say, no, I'm not participating. I'm certainly not participating by confronting a person who's kind of really carrying out devilish deeds. So when there is a confrontation with the devil, whether internal or external, it should alert us to the fact that it's time to change our attitude. Very important. Like, whoa, man, where did I learn that from? Or who am I mirroring? Or who did I unconsciously acting out? When you're feeling like the Terminator. It's like, whoa, where did I see that? So, not seeing the whole picture, our perception or our consciousness is not necessarily false by intention. We often misjudge out of ignorance. And further, it is out of our ignorance that we persecute our surfacing shadow. We need to embrace in order to transcend it. We need to be able to say, yeah, I got a real nasty streak. This definitely. And just kind of jot down your shadow buttons. We all have them. I mean, that's basically what the 10 Commandments are. You want to see somebody's shadow? You want to see God's shadow? Push one of those commandments. You'll see it fast. So, in an active, conscious act of not identifying as being the devil, okay? It is that it exists within and without. And it's a tricky little thing. So, once again, the part to be able to embrace the shadow, and that means to come to terms with our own inner devil. We must transcend the state of ignorance, our own ignorance. When people don't understand something, it's the devil. Not necessarily, but the ignorance is the devil. The perception of your ignorance is the devil. But if we can look at it and say, oh, well, wait a second, let me look a little closer here. Yes, there is this primitive instinct in me to bop somebody over the head when they, don't love you or decide to leave or abandon, or sometimes people demand another person, particularly in relationships, to grow up. Grow up. It's infuriating. You're taking your life in your hands when you're telling a 50-year-old who's being run by a tyrannical 5-year-old to grow up. Now, it's the fastest way to get a rise out of somebody, but I'm not so sure you want to do that. Or sometimes you do it inadvertently. You just say it, and it's just, you're kind of neutral. It's like, oh, come on, man, just grow up. Get conscious. Ow. People will lie in wait and get you for that. How dare you expose their shadow? How dare you name it? And sometimes what happens is the person really hears it. Goes, whoa, is that what I'm really doing? I just thought I was just expressing my truth. Well, that may be your truth, but it's like taking everybody else down. So find another way to express it. So when we accept this devil. Now, it's or our shadow, which once again is an archetype, and the shadow can also be the golden shadow. Shadow isn't always dark, just like the devil has golden horns, which means when we're pierced by that, gold consciousness is going to come. So even when we have an encounter, both internally or externally, and, sometimes one of the best things to do is study psychic self-defense if you're feeling that there's negative forces. I think the finest book on psychic self-defense is by Dion Fortune. It's a little archaic, but it's very accurate. She was an amazing magician, okay? So we also need to remember that the devil, as Lucifer, is the light bringer. That will bring us to consciousness if we survive the encounter. Lucifer was a little too ambitious, or so we're told. So that's part of our spiritual needs. Our spiritual needs are represented by these angels, but the fallen angel too has its purpose. So once again, we need clarity on each element of that. We need clarity on that. Wow, I'm in the middle of a paradox. I can't choose one over the other because then the other is set free to, run your life. So we hold that tension of the opposites. Because when the primitive side of man comes up, we see some serious nastiness, and we get set back. So when we are looking at this, why? It's like, well, why would I want this? Because we need to learn. We need to know about His presence. We need to know what we're looking at. We need to know the name of the angel that is oppressing us. And once again, it's still a messenger. It tells us that we're a little tricky with this, we're like, just like the rest of humanity. We got our good days and our not so good days. And very often, this image or this archetype, it's somewhat of a scapegoat. See, and the scapegoat supposedly carried off the sins of the tribe. And the significance of our sin, which means missing the mark, has been disowned or depersonalized. And so we blame it on the devil. And the devil's right arm is red because he is in matter, in the act of doing. And the left arm or the hand is a skeleton, depending on which images you're looking at. So it's the cycle of nature. And this archetype has great knowledge. Now that it has wisdom, it has its own form of wisdom. I suppose it thinks it's wise. So these, or when something devilish comes into our life, it's like, whoa, okay, I got a shadow dance. I got something happening here that wants to make me conscious. So don't get caught up in what the other person is doing and saying and blah, blah, blah. Just go like, okay, what does this do to me? Why does this evoke such suffering? The suffering is coming from the conflict within ourselves. That's That's where the suffering comes from. Because people could say any dumb thing that they want to say, or any lie that they want to say, but we get, how could they say that about me? How could they think that? How could they be? Because that's what they think and that's what they believe. You're the one that has the power to say, let me reflect on that. Is there any truth in that? Was there any truth in it? Is it something that I fear that I might have or be part of? It doesn't mean it's you, the whole of you. It means, there's a leak. So when we examine or we work with this image, it will bring up the things that we really don't like about humanity, and certainly don't like about ourselves, or we can never forgive, or we can't look at it in any other way except that's bad, bad, bad. Well, it's okay when you're a child to say that's good and that's bad, because you're learning to discern. But then as practicing adults, we need to realize where we are at war with ourselves and how the devil knows that, and it's going to bring up a situation, whether it's internally or externally, to have us look at it. It doesn't have absolute power, but it does have a strong influence. So when we begin to look at this image of the devil and see that it also has golden horns, that the true purpose, if we don't get tricked, is to wake us up a little bit more. So what Jung talks about here, I'm going to read a quote from Jung. The devil or the dark angel, and the dark angel can be the light bringer, because it brings us into consciousness. And consciousness, a lot of consciousness is what's not so marvelous about ourselves. That's consciousness, not just what's good. And people who think they're bad, their suffering is to find out that they're gifted, or they've got qualities that they don't want. They disown those qualities because either no one helped them see that, or it's not believable. It's the golden shadow, the gold we give away by being good. Well, we need that, so go get your gold back, all right? So what Jung says here is the dammed up instinct forces in civilized man are immensely more destructive and hence more dangerous than the instincts of the primitive, who in a modest degree is constantly living negative instincts. Consequently, no war on the historical past can rival a war between civilized nation and a colossal scale of horror. So that's when we're looking at it, when the devil is working in the world, all right? And Jung goes on to say that the classic picture of the devil as half man, half beast exactly describes the grotesque and sinister side of the unconscious, for we have never really come to grips with it, and consequently it has remained in its original savage state. So as we begin to understand that this exists and contribute our little part by working out our little devils, or at least recognizing the world's greater devils and not participating, that's what can eventually bring world peace, and certainly bring peace and love to yourself. So it's a very important archetype. So next week, bye-bye.
Snap 'em, zap 'em, hold 'em, trap 'em. Mice, rats, or other rodents causing you grief? Get rid of them. Victor has the broadest, most innovative line of rodent and insect control products on the market. From our iconic snap traps with the Big Red Victor V to new products like Victor Holdfast, your mouse, rat, and insect problems are a thing of the past. There's a reason people have trusted Victor to get rid of pests for nearly 120 years. Because with Victor, it's done. Available at Walmart. Available at Walmart. Available at Walmart. Available at Walmart.